Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic, and welcome to my abode. Today's story is that of the Wilkinson family. This one is unbelievable. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Hello, how are we all today, my lovely sinners? It has cooled down slightly, but I decided to move operations inside anyway, so welcome to Granny's chair. During the summer months and the winter months, I will be filming here in my cosy, comfy corner. Very serene, very serene. Let's dive right in. So, the Wilkinson family consisted of Dad, Peter Wilkinson, 47 at the time of this case, his wife, Tracy, she was 50 at the time, and their two children, Lydia and Pierce. Lydia was at university. She was in Bristol University, and their son Pierce was 13, so he was at home. They also had a greyhound called Mandy. I think that's so cute. With that in mind, because we are indoors now, you may hear Hank, the pooch. He's our little Frenchie. You may hear him snoring or farting. Who knows? If the doorbell goes, you will hear him barking. The family lived on Greyhound Lane. That's funny, isn't it? Because they had a greyhound as well. They lived on Greyhound Lane in Stourbridge, which is in the West Midlands. They were a really close-knit family. Lydia and Pierce, the siblings, they would speak, even though she was at university, they would speak nearly every day. And I think that's really sweet and really cute. They just sound very, very bonded, very loving and kind towards each other. Tracy, the mum, she volunteered with the elderly, and she also volunteered at a rehab centre because she had struggled with alcoholism in the past, and she had gone to this rehab centre to get herself well. So now that she was sober and she was better, that was something that was really important to her, to help other people in that situation. And the overriding feeling about Tracy was just that she was incredibly compassionate. She was kind, she was caring, she would help anybody. She would give anyone like her last, what is that saying? She'd give someone the shirt off her back. Oh my God, I can't think of a single saying. I can't even think what they're called, because are they called sayings? Moving on, she was kind and compassionate. The sort of person that would always stop and talk to a homeless person and give them food to eat. That sort of a person. And it sounds like her son Pierce was very much like her. They both had an ability to talk to anybody. They were very approachable and very nice and very kind. Easy to get on with. You know those people that you meet and you can just chat to, and they make it really easy. It sounds like Pierce and Tracy were very much like that. In March of 2016, Tracy met a man called Aaron Barley, who was 23 years old. She'd gone to the supermarket to do her weekly shop, and she saw Aaron sleeping rough outside that supermarket in a cardboard box. When Tracy had finished her food shopping, she came out and she could not bear to see him sleeping in the cold outside like that. So she decided to take Aaron home. He had dinner with the family, and she discussed ways with him that she could help him to get back on his feet. This involved taking him to council offices to get him some housing, get him a roof over his head, and this is what she did. So he ended up living in a hostel, but Tracy didn't just leave it there. She made sure that he had food. She made sure that he had food for the week for his breakfasts. She made sure that he had a hot meal. I think he was coming and having dinner with the family quite frequently at that point. So she really took Aaron under her wing. Not only that, but Peter, the dad, he helped Aaron to get a job. So Aaron became a labourer, and now he was in a very different position from sleeping in a cardboard box outside of a supermarket. He was now in a hostel. He had a roof over his head. He had a family that were helping him. He had a hot meal every day and a job. So he had money coming in. So a very, very different situation. However, after 5 months of sobriety, Aaron would relapse, and he began taking drugs again, and things took a bit of a dark turn. Let's talk about Aaron. Who is Aaron? As is often the case, Aaron's story is not a happy one. He was born in 1993, and he was a child of incest. So it was an uncle and a niece. So his parents, I can't get my brain is struggling with that. So an uncle and a niece. I have to think about it in terms of my own family, which is sick to do, but otherwise I can't get it. So So that's like me and a nephew of mine. Okay, yep, got my head around it. Leave the brain. So what does that make him to each of those people? Oh, that's... Let's not go too deep, Sophie. His father died when he was 4 of cancer, and then when he was 6 years old, his mother died of a heart attack. After this, he was placed in many different places to live. So he was put into care, he had foster families, and he also spent some time with different family members. So all over the place, really. Sadly, during that time, during his childhood, he was physically and sexually abused. He became a very violent and very troubled young man. He was often in fights. People that lived with him and knew him in the care system said that he was deeply disturbed. At 12 years old, he was convicted for his first criminal offence. And then after that, there were 20 more that followed between then and when he was 23. His convictions were things like assault on a police officer, possession of a firearm, and most worryingly, I'm surprised at the sentence for this one, I really am. At 18, I think that the offence was committed at 17 when he was sort of a child. I say child, but he was a child. He was under 18, so I got that wrong. So when he was a child at 17, he took a piece of wood and he hit his then girlfriend with that piece of wood 50 times, around 50 times. He then snapped the piece of wood in half and tried to stab her with it. Now, if that is not attempted murder, I'm not sure what is. He was sentenced to 3 years. Barley had gone to a school for social, emotional and behavioural children, and then at 18 he'd gone into prison. And then when he came out, he had aged out of the care system, just shoved from pillar to post, abused, just awful, like awful. And then they just age out of the system and they're on their own. That is when his life living on the streets began, and he fell into addiction and alcoholism, and that brings us to the time of our story. So we're now back in 2016 and Barley has relapsed. Barley was he was dropping too many balls. He wasn't turning up to work, and Barley was also being violent and aggressive towards managerial staff. So Peter had to take the job away. He had to fire. How could I not think of the words for that? Like, take the job away. What's that called? He had to fire him. At this point, Barley pulled away from the family. So bearing in mind, for 5 months, he's been having dinner with them. They've been very, very close, and they have been supporting him. I believe they did things like paid for a mobile phone contract and things like that. So they really were supporting him emotionally and in financial ways as well. So it was quite a separation, really. And the thing I think with that is that it's understandable. Like, if you've relapsed, I mean, I don't personally know what that would be like. I've not been an addict or have alcoholism or anything, but I can imagine there's a level of embarrassment, I guess, like, or shame that you've let yourself, but also these people down that are helping you. Maybe even some anger. I don't know, like anger towards them or towards yourself. Like, I guess there's a big mix of stuff, but you're not going to want to be like living in their pockets, going around for dinner. And Peter has just taken your job away. So I think, yeah, they had some space. They really were obviously trying to do the right thing and trying to help this person. But sometimes you can't help people unless they really want to help themselves. You can't do it for somebody else. They have to do it for themselves. And this is an example of that, really. After 2 months of not seeing Barley, Peter came out one morning and found Barley asleep on their drive. He was in quite a bad way. He'd been attacked. He was covered in bruises. It wasn't great. And at this point, the Wilkinsons decided to help him again. This time, they didn't try and get him a job, but they paid him money for doing odd jobs around their house, their garden, like a handyman. And they also found him accommodation again. He spent Christmas with them that year. He had nowhere else to go. And he gave a card to Tracy that said, "To the mother I never had." In the new year of 2017, things were looking up again for Barley. He got himself a new job, he was living in a flat, and he was having dinner twice a week with the Wilkinsons. Sadly, Barley would lose his job. This meant that he lost his flat because he couldn't pay the rent. So the Wilkinsons took him in and they said that he could stay with them for 2 weeks while he found himself accommodation and a new job to support himself. On the 30th of March 2017, at about 10 a.m, Lydia, so she's at university in Bristol, the daughter, she receives a phone call from her boyfriend to say, your house is all over the news, basically. Lydia then got on the old internet and had a Google and found that there were pictures of basically like a crime scene at her house, police everywhere, ambulances. So she panicked and she called the police to ask what the hell was going on. The police informed Lydia that her mother and her brother were dead and that her father was in hospital in critical condition. It's almost too much to comprehend, isn't it, to hear something like that? Lydia was then collected from university in Bristol and brought down to hospital to be with her dad. Peter needed life-saving surgery. So he went into surgery, and while that was all happening, Lydia must have been terrified for her dad. But while that was happening, Lydia had to go and identify her brother and her mother's body. That is just horrific. And she said that she spent quite a lot of time in the room with them because she just knew that this would be the last time in her life that she would ever see them again. Peter would survive his surgery, and he spent 6 days in intensive care and 4 more days on a ward before he was allowed to go home. When he was able to, he told police exactly what had happened that morning. The morning had started like any other, and they had quite a routine going on, like most people do. Between 6:30 and 7, he would get up, get ready, and take Mandy, the greyhound, for a walk. When he got home that morning, he assumed that his wife and Pierce had slept in, because normally they would have been up when he got home and there would be a cup of tea waiting on the side. There was no tea. As he walked further into the kitchen, he then encountered a man in a balaclava. This man stabbed Peter twice in the stomach, twice in the back, and twice in the face. Just a lot of anger and rage. And when he was doing so, he was saying the words, "Die, you bastard." And it was when he said that that Peter realised who this balaclavaed man was. It was Aaron Barley. This is a man that they had so desperately tried to support, help, financially, emotionally. They tried to give stability. They gave him a job. They gave him a roof over his head, all of this stuff. Barley left Peter for dead. And then he left the house, went to the drive and stole the family Land Rover, and off he went. Peter managed to call 999. He made his way outside and collapsed into a chair. And then 2 ambulances, air ambulances, police, the lot just came to the house. They were there within 7 minutes. He asked paramedics to go and check on his wife and his son. One of the last things that Peter heard as he was being taken out of the house and to hospital was a paramedic saying, 1 dead, 1 in cardiac arrest. And that just, that is just gut-wrenching. I can't imagine. Tracy had been pronounced dead at the scene. She was found in their bedroom on the floor naked, and she had been stabbed 17 times. She had been in bed sleeping, and she had been stabbed through the duvet cover and then somehow had, either rolled out of bed or been placed out of bed onto the floor. Pierce was found in his bedroom on his front, struggling to breathe, and he couldn't really move because one of the stab wounds, he'd been stabbed, I think, around 7 times or 8 times. And one of the stab wounds had nearly severed his spinal cord. So he couldn't move. He's very restricted, and he was really he was fighting for his life when they found him. Pierce was taken to Birmingham Children's Hospital, and sadly there was nothing they could do, and he died later on that day. Because Peter was conscious at the scene, despite his horrific injuries, he was able to tell police that this was Aaron Barley, and it was obvious that he had stolen the family Land Rover, so they had what is that called? The number plate. They had that. So they got on quickly to hunt him down. This led to an erratic chase. He did actually eventually crash. That wasn't the end of it though. He then fled and there was a chase, but then they caught him. They found the murder weapon wrapped in a shirt in the Land Rover. And they also looked at the CCTV. The family had CCTV around the house. Barley had tried to break into the house during the night. He wasn't successful. He climbed over the fence. He tried his luck and he couldn't get in. So then he went and waited in the shed. So he was pretty determined. He wasn't like, oh, can't get in, I'll go home or go wherever he was at the time, on the streets or whatever. No, he stayed and slept in their shed and waited like a predator until the morning, knowing full well the family's morning routine. At one point, the dog comes out and you can see Barley crawling across the garden so that he's not seen. And I was just like, you know, when your heart's in your mouth, because I did think that he was going to hurt the dog. And I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm watching here, but he didn't. And he let Peter and take Mandy for a walk because Peter had then left the house unlocked. He then stabbed Tracy in her bed and then went into Pierce's room and then lay in wait for Peter to come home. If he had been successful in the night in breaking in, he would have just killed them all in their beds. In his interviews, Barley showed absolutely no remorse and actually, well, quite the opposite. He was glad that they were dead and he was gutted that he hadn't been successful in killing Peter. He gave no reason, no motive for the killings. However, I'm not saying this was the motive, but 3 weeks before the murders, they cut off his mobile phone contract that they paid for. So I don't think that was the motive, but I think it was a tipping point. Also, I have talked about this before. What can we learn from cases? What can we learn moving forward from things that happen around us? And with this case, I think it really is, it's lovely to be kind-hearted and generous and wonderful. But I think there are safe ways that can be done. There are charities. I think there's shelter. There's lots of charities that are set up for helping people in crisis or homeless people. And that would be a much safer way. I'm not saying that Tracy and Pierce deserved to die for their kindness. Also, the reason I say that is because the Wilkinsons did not have access to Barley's past and his history. They didn't know anything about it because they've just met him on the street and they only know what he had told them. Whereas if you work with somebody through an organisation, they will work with support workers or care workers or, you know, like specially trained people. And those people will likely have access to their past and they would know about his criminal history, his violent past, possible triggers and things like that. So, you know, they're in a better position to know how to deal with that particular person. Whereas the Wilkinsons had none of this knowledge. Just a month before the killings, Barley was speaking with a caseworker. This caseworker described Barley as controlling and manipulative, and that he was exhibiting very worrying behaviour. In his past, he had made comments about killing a police officer and a prison guard. It was like a kind of to-do list. Oh, I'd like to do that. But a text message around the time of the murders would suggest that his target had changed. It said, "Stay a predator, change the prey." Couldn't be much clearer, could it? As a teenager, Barley even had a hit list of people that he wanted to kill. So there's all this violence and anger, and he's really troubled. And I don't actually know how much the Wilkinsons knew, but I don't think it was the full story at all. I don't think they knew who they were inviting into their home. And that kind of is the point. You don't. And isn't it just so sad? It's so sad even saying that because it's like they're good people. They're trying to do something so amazing. And it just, for it to end like that it's just horrific. It's so tragic. Barley pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. During the trial, he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Barley was given a life sentence with a minimum of 30 years. That was later increased to 35 years. So he will be eligible for parole when he is about I can't do maths. About 59. However, the judge was going to, she really thought about giving him a full, no, what's it called? A whole life tariff. You know, when they say you're never coming out, there's no parole, mate, you're in there forever. Toyed with that idea, toyed with it, but then because of his age, decided against it. Not sure about that one, to be honest. And went on to say to him that he probably would just be in prison forever because he was incredibly dangerous, in which case just give him a whole life sentence. Don't get that. I can't help but think of the what ifs. Lydia had been home only 4 days before Barley killed her mum and brother. So that was close. And she was due to come home, I think, a day or two after they had died, actually, to go and get a dress with her mum. So she very well could have been at home as well. And also, if Barley had managed to break into the house that night, all 3 members of the family that were there that night probably would have died. At the funeral, Tracy and Pierce were in the same coffin. Just so sad. And Lydia and Peter, they tried to go back and live at home. They didn't want Barley to have stolen something else from them as well by taking their home away from them. But then in 2018, they put it on the market. Lydia went back to university and she hopes to become a medical researcher, and kind of like in honour of her mum, who always wanted to help people. And that is all I have for you on today's case. Let me know what you think about this one. Can you hear Hanky? I don't know if you'll be able to hear him snoring. He's dreaming. Oh, he's doing that thing where they run in their dreams. Like that. Hope you've all had a wonderful week. I've got a bad toe. That's a bit of a shame. Also, out of all of the year, why do I have to get a bad, it's not just a bad toe like ouch, it's ugly. There's something wrong with my toe. Too much information maybe? I don't know. But it's ugly. And that has to happen just as we're entering into flip-flop and sandal season. Really? Thank you. I must say this has been much more pleasant having a nice cosy chair and not being boiling hot. I haven't moaned once about being hot, have I? There you go. I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. Hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a mug or a jug or a hug of gin. Have a wonderful weekend. I look forward to talking to you in the comments as always, and I will see you next Friday. Bye.